Okay.
So welcome, everyone. This is another in these many great sessions we've been having at the Volunteer Summit for 2022. This program is called Tutoring People in Refugee Communities, How to Get Started. And I guess it's aimed at novice tutorers, but I'm looking forward to it, even having done some tutoring, because I'm sure I can use pointers. So we have two presenters. We have Lori Weinberg and Nancy Riddlemoser, and they have combined a lot of experience in this field. Lori was an instructor in the ESL program at Riddle's Community College, and then she served as the ESL program coordinator for 15 years prior to retiring in 2020. She has a bachelor's degree in French, a master's degree in counseling, and a certification in ESL. And then Nancy served as a Peace Corps volunteer and volunteer trainer in Paraguay, where she learned Spanish and Guarani. And she has a current Virginia teaching certificate and is certified in special education, ESL, adult education, and a master's as a reading specialist. So we look forward to your presentation and to learning a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're so happy that so many of you were able to join us this afternoon. Nancy and I are going to share this presentation. And what we're going to do is ask that you put any questions you might have in the chat as we go through the presentation. And at the end, we will have time to attempt to answer any questions that might come up or are not addressed in the presentation, either one. So before we even get started with our presentation, how many of you have tutored already or worked with refugees? I don't know that I can see hands.
But you can, yeah, you can.
Okay, that's good.
Good.
All
yeah.
right.
Mhm.
All right. So,
I'm going to do myself. Okay. And I'm glad you're here too. Like I said, or like Lori said, we're going to split this about 45 minutes talking and about 15 minutes for questions. So this may be a refresher for some of you. It may be new information for others, but we're glad you're here and hope you stay.
now I'm already having trouble getting the slide to move, Helen.
Try the next one. Okay. Frozen.
I see it, but
I have your slide deck here. I'm happy to share mine if you can move it along.
okay, if you could go ahead to the first slide then, Helen.
Okay, I'm just gonna need you to stop sharing your screen. Or I can just remove co-host permission. Okay, perfect.
Except we can't. Oh, okay.
She's going to add us. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't see anything.
I don't know what she's doing.
My screen is stuck. Hold on.
Okay. This is what we were anticipating.
we did a dry run. We don't know why that's happening. That's it.
I know. Oh my gosh.
Okay. I have my computer, which has had buzzing before. I don't know that it would buzz today. Shall I try it on mine?
It looks like we're back.
Okay. Good. Okay. Okay. And then put it on slide presentation.
All right, can you see it?
Yay.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I think many of us, thank you for your patience. I think many of us sometimes going into a teaching or tutoring situation have our own set of assumptions about what our role is. as do the students or clients in this case, with regards to what our relationship is going to be. And so I think it's really important that we pay attention to setting the tone and establishing how you want these tutoring sessions to go. I think we all want to have a very casual and comfortable relationship with the people that we're tutoring. And so we want to set that up for them, that this is what our expectations are. It may be in the beginning, people are still used to calling you Miss Lori or Miss Nancy, because that happened, even though I tried to be very informal in my classroom at Reynolds Community College. Students just couldn't bring themselves to call me by my first name. But in someone's home, obviously, it's going to be a little bit more comfortable anyway. But it's just good to have your set of expectations and know what their expectations might be with regards to the relationship. An important thing that Dr. Salam mentioned, if you were in her session, the last session, it's very important to understand the touching parameters when working with Afghan clients, excuse me, that you do not shake hands. A woman does not shake hands with men. And that's important because we have a tendency, obviously, to just go up and shake hands with the people we're meeting for the first time. So we can be warm and we can be casual and friendly, just as long as we understand what some of the boundaries are. We also tend to be very task-oriented, I think, as Americans. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later in terms of setting boundaries. But yeah, we'll get to that later on that one. And one thing I think probably most of you know, you need to speak in a very normal tone, enunciate clearly, and do not speak loudly, because speaking louder does not make it easier for people to understand. And even talking too slowly can be very difficult. So we set the tone, we meet and greet casually, we're warm and friendly, and we speak in a normal tone, and we are aware of our boundaries with regards to touching. The next one, Helen.
Helen, can we forward, or do you have to do that?
Yeah, here we go.
Thank you.
Okay, I imagine that a lot of you have spent time living in other countries, either as a traveler or there to learn another language, or maybe as a long-term visitor. I think it's really important for people to think about what you would do if you were in their shoes. And if you can think of an experience, probably you can come up with some situation, if you've traveled a fair amount, where you felt really lost and there were certain things you wish you could get help with. So it helps to put that in mind, keep that in mind when you're working with your client. What would you do if you were in their shoes? And also, again, those experiences you've had yourself, perhaps in living and traveling abroad, what would you find helpful if you were new to that country or culture? I know a lot of us spend a lot of time preparing for that before we go, but here they are, and they're going to need our help. What would you do if you were in their situation? Now I'm going to turn it over to Nancy. She's going to give you a little more of the academic piece.
Yeah, I don't look like a nerd, but I am. The comprehensible input is a term used by Stephen Krashen. The names on here on this slide are gurus in the field of second language acquisition. And Stephen Krashen talks about comprehensible input. So if you are with a client and you're saying something and they look like deer in the headlights, it was not comprehensible. So you need to either simplify or move back and say it a totally different way, or it with fewer words, or with props, pictures.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Jim Cummins or Louis Small, I met at a conference. I got to shake hands with him, and he speaks of funds of knowledge. And I think when the doctor was presenting earlier today, she was talking about people making their own tushaks, the pillows or mattresses for their home. That's a skill. Making Afghan bread is the skill. Embroidery, whatever they know how to do is their own funds of knowledge. So she reiterated, let's not make people feel like they're dumb or stupid or that they have no skills, because everyone does. And when you tap into those, they have the background knowledge in that area, and language related to those will be more easy or easier for them to grasp or comprehend or to want to learn about. Jim Cummins is from Toronto, and go back.
Yeah, it's good.
Sarah, thanks. Is from Toronto, and he too is a big name in language, second language acquisition. And BICs are what kids or adults pick up when they just hear things repeatedly. Oh yeah, thanks, okay. I know when I was in Greece years ago, I kept hearing endoxy, endoxy, endoxy. And I asked someone who spoke English in Greek, what's that mean? It meant okay. So that was my first word, okay. And then CALPs are the academic language, cognitive academic language proficiency. So if you're working with someone who actually has a degree or was a professional, they know English, they're going to be more interested in that aspect of language acquisition. Even learning to drive, that's academic language. Or if they want to get back into the field they were in their own country, that's academic language. So those are different. And one person may start off with BICs and move to CALPs, or either one may stay in those regions or reigns. But you're going to be helping the people that you tutor in their cultural and linguistic background knowledge. So helping them know and understand about our habits and culture and learning about theirs. And of course, English. Next. Thanks. We're all on the road to mastery, and you want to begin with the end in mind. When you ask people, what do you want? What do you need? They'll say, learn English. See if you can find out what it is they want. Do they speak English? If not, then you need to start with very basics. Do they read and write? Or can they identify the alphabet? If not, then you're going to be working with them at that level. If they say they want a driver's license, but they can't read or write, you could work with colors, the colors of the lights or the signs. Some people want citizenship. I think I've identified 8 or 10 topics that I kind of call baby citizenship or beginners, like color of the flag, where the capital is.
Make sure he knows it.
I'm sorry. Okay. Maybe they want a job, a better job, or if they're more advanced or they have degrees and a lot of language proficiency, they may want to brush up on resume writing in this country. So how can you help them get there? And I can't see the bottom. Oh, wait. And in the time you have together, and that goes back to boundaries as well. If you say, I'm coming each Wednesday for 1 hour, you are probably not going to get to write a resume in that one Wednesday hour, because it's time consuming just collecting the information. So be mindful of the time you have and say, yes, we'll do part 2 next week, or I can only get this much from you today. And now, Lori.
So once you get started working with your client, it's important to remember that we should be going slow and steady and to set realistic expectations. I think oftentimes we work with learners and we have certain expectations. They're going to be able to, I gave them homework, I told them to practice, and we seem to be back to square one the next time you come and meet with them. That's okay. One, you have to keep in mind all of the other time conflicts they might have in terms of sitting. They just may not have the luxury of spending as much time as you might like doing homework and reviewing. But I think if you just remember to go over it and expect each time you're going to need to go back and go over things you've been over before, over and over again. And that's perfectly fine. So that's the slow and steady. And as things start to, settle in and they seem to understand it, then of course, expand on and add to that knowledge. The other thing to keep in mind are those time boundaries, as Nancy was mentioning. and we talked about a little bit in the last session, or Dr. Salam did. It's really important. Again, we have our own time orientation, and this particular population, the Afghan population, may have their own time orientation. But as long as you can set clear boundaries, and you let them know you're coming for 1 hour. Maybe you know that they're going to invite you to have tea. So when you're planning your hour with them, I'm coming at 9:30 and I have to leave at 10:30. Then they learn to know what to expect from you. And if you understand they're going to ask you if you want to have tea, maybe you can build that in or allow yourself, that extra time at the end to do that. So again, setting realistic expectations is very crucial, as well as helping them understand the framework and the time boundaries. And encourage them, practice, practice, practice. Speak out loud to yourself in the bathroom, talk to your kids, even if they don't understand what you're saying, just practice, practice, practice. There's always room for more practice. And finally, it's a good practice to create English habits, modeling, please, thank you, you're welcome, excuse me, so that they can start to apply those universally in other situations. All right, Nancy.
I think you have the 4 domains.
Documentation.
My bad, I'm looking the wrong way. Okay, so when you're planning these sessions, I'm a firm believer in documentation. For yourself, for sure, and you want to encourage the client to begin documentation. So if they have a calendar or you want to print off a sheet for the month in advance, then you can write every Wednesday, 9:30 to 10:30, 9:30 to 10:30, so that they can see that. Someone in the house probably does speak English. So you're going to remind them, this is when I come, this is when I come. Maybe you want to put a picture of yourself on every Wednesday. Or if they're using their calendar on their phone, you can, draw a picture of a book or a mouth speaking. Dated samples, you want to know, what could they say or do the first time I ever met them? I don't know. But write it down, jot it down someplace. And then if they have a notebook or a workbook, always date the page, even if they're copying from you of what the date is, so they can go back in time and see their progress. You can record samples. Of course, you can do it on WhatsApp. You can have Zoom meetings. There's also Vocaroo, and I put the link up there for that. So you record and share or send, and with their permission, you could photograph or video them. Again, with their permission, don't sneak pictures. Okay, Laurie.
Going back to what Nancy was saying at the beginning, when we meet with our client and we are trying to figure out what it is that they're trying to learn, what's most important to them, keep in mind there are 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, writing. Of course, they overlap, but it may be that what they want is to learn how to speak well enough to go to their child's school and interact with the teacher, or to know what to say when they go to the doctor's office, so that the speaking, even though we all might think reading and writing are important, that might not be what they want. What they want right now is to really be able to speak. And of course, that's going to overlap with listening and some of the others, depending on how you present the information. But listen to what they want and try to focus on the domains that they're interested in improving on the most.
Okay. Next. Thanks. Okay, my favorite topic, not about myself, of course, but is all about me, because everyone wants to share something about themselves, and everyone, back to their funds of knowledge, knows something about themselves. So we've created sentence starters that are a pattern. I am. So I am a woman, I am this many years old, I'm a Virginian, I'm married, I'm not married, I was married. So you don't have to teach all 10 of these at once, but it's a good way to start, especially if the client is starting to read or write, because once they're used to saying that and repeating it, it's as if they are reading it. I am Maria, whatever the client's name is. And it's like, okay, that's your name. That's you. Again, you might need a picture of them. Once they learn numbers, I am this many years old. You can write the numbers. If they don't read or write numbers, you might do tally marks, see if they can count in any language. So it's good. And if they're very interested in this, of course, they can do this with their own family as well. Or if they have a notebook or spiral notebook or a journal, they can practice writing these, they can practice saying them. If you're giving them practice or homework, you can say, I want you to read 1, 2, and 3 to me on Vocaroo and send it to me so I can hear you speak English before our next meeting. Next. Thank you. There's no one uniform lesson that everyone can use. Every one of our clients will be different. They'll all have different needs. There'll be different domains they need to focus on, but we came up with just the framework on how you can plan a lesson. First is the duration. Is it going to be just 15 minutes of speaking? Is it going to be 30 minutes of speaking and listening? Is it 1 hour divided into 4 different domains or 4 different segments? Or is it just a 5-minute review or practice? So you're looking at the domains of speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And then what is your language focus? For speaking, is it questions and answers, or are you going to tackle small talk? For listening, is it a podcast because they can listen and understand? Or is it you calling them on the phone and turning your back to them and saying, hello, how are you? Is it reading the alphabet or a recipe or the DMV? And writing, will they be copying or tracing, or will they be completing an application? Or are you just working on punctuation? What method? Will you be introducing it? Are you reviewing something from last week? Is there just audio and you're not speaking much? Is it hands-on? Materials, whiteboard and markers. Some of you may have some of the tote bags from Reestablish that have those in them. You can also use photographs. I still have photographs left from when I taught, and I have lots of manila envelopes of more. And if someone's learning to write, they might say man, brown, brown man or brown hair, but it's something different. Also, Scrabble tiles, bananagram, using notebooks, texting each other, using the calendar, newspaper, scissors, and glue. Let's cut out nouns. Let's cut out the word I. Let's make a sentence with, bold-faced letters, what have you. And then plan a review for 5 minutes at the end, or stop twice during the session. Or if you want, at the end, you say, what did you learn? It's an exit slip. And they can say, I learned. Or what did you not understand? What do you still have questions about? And they can tell you that. So hopefully that framework will be of some use to you. Next.
We thought you might be interested in, if you're just going blind, where do I start? 10 sample lesson topics, and they go from self all the way up through money. I'm not going to read through them all, but remember that regardless of the topic, you can craft your lesson for the different level of learner that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be the all about me that Nancy talked about earlier. If you're talking about self, it may just be, and again, even with the more advanced students, it might be good to continue to go over some of these things because they have to provide that in a variety of situations. If you're talking about food, for example, you may be starting with shopping lists for a lower level learner and advancing all the way up to exploring more about dietary needs and things like that. So all of these work and can work for any level. And again, I encourage you to stress focusing on what it is the client wants. And part of the reason also we mentioned these 10 topics is because, as Nancy said earlier, a lot of times when you ask a client, what is it that you want to learn? They'll say English, and they just don't know what to tell you. So it's good to have a bag of tricks or some ideas of your own. Either they know specifically what they want, they may want to learn to, prepare for their driver's license, or they don't have a clue, and they're happy to do anything that you go over with them. So this is just to give you some ideas of where you might pull from. And then the next slide just shows you, if you were planning a short lesson, here's the sample lesson. If you were doing greetings, so it might involve say and practice. And again, with a fair amount of repetition. The dates, I think it's all explained up there. Maybe you want to help them understand how to spell out certain things. And you can practice that, as Nancy said earlier, in a variety of different ways. And we are going to go through some of the more hands-on strategies in a little bit. And finally, whether we call it homework or just review, we're going to encourage the student, the learner, to practice the things that you've gone over that day. So you've got a session where you're doing greetings, it's simple information, basic information, dates, alphabet, and then you wind up with homework and perhaps asking them, what they take away from this particular lesson that you did with them that day. All right, go ahead.
Okay, props and plans, we're all juggling a lot in our own lives, and and you may be juggling when you first start tutoring, but it's very safe to share pictures of your own family. People like to see our family. I say, don't share a picture of your house because it may be bigger than theirs, or pets because they don't have the same relationship with pets that we do. I know a Congolese family I'm working with, they can't handle that I have cats, and they said they ate cats in their refugee camp. So they know I have cats, but I don't talk about my cats with them. Maybe a holiday item. Valentine's Day is coming up. President's Day is coming up. Groundhog's Day just passed. So perhaps you take a little box of candy, or just pictures from a book. Sometimes what I would do when I taught adult ESL for Henrico is I would say, this is what your children are learning at school this week, or this season, or for this holiday. So I wasn't saying they were childlike, but I was sharing information that their kids might come home and talk to them about. So if you bought something, mandarin oranges, and you've got a whole bunch, you can take one or two and you can talk about the color, the shape, how many sections there are, peeling. So use a theme, a plan, some kind of activity that's related to specific skills. Hands-on's best, because from your hand, it goes up to your brain. You remember by doing. So counting coins, following simple recipe. And I'm saying simple recipe, 1 apple, 1 orange, 1 banana. It could be that simple. Cut, stir, with pictures of a bowl and a spoon. Assemble an item. Of course, using emergency numbers, bus schedules, going to the library, getting a library card. In fact, if you're in Henrico and you have a library card in Gmail, you can use Rosetta Stone for free. So that's a nice field trip or activity.
Okay. And this overlaps a bit with what Nancy was just saying, but you can pick up so much stuff for free that can be very useful. So shopping with circulars, just picking up things from Food Line, and that has many different purposes. One, it's free. You don't have to, you can save yourself some money, but also if you're trying to help them orient to life in this country and going to a grocery store, it's good to help them understand how much it costs to buy those mandarin oranges at Walmart versus how much it costs to buy them at Publix. A refugee family we're currently working with discovered quickly that things are very, very expensive at Publix, and maybe that's not the best place to shop. But comparing prices, it gives you so many opportunities to review numbers, and also just the pictures, going through the pictures. What are these things? And do you eat these things in your country or culture or whatever? The same is true with maps. It's a good way to help them, one, get oriented, and also to just see where they are. I know everybody uses GPS, but that's reading too and getting a sense of where it is that you're going. And for those people who are actually going to write checks, this is a good opportunity to practice writing checks. And if they put in deposits with deposit slips, which maybe they do in the beginning, I haven't done it in so long, I've almost forgotten how to do it myself. But that's a real hands-on, easy, free thing and useful for them to practice doing. And I think we've already talked about finding freebies and samples, so
Right.
we don't need to go on about
And
that.
I'm just going to add, when Lori's talking about the circulars, even circling, maybe they can't say yet, I like, but it's like,
Or pointing.
they
Yeah.
can point, but circle, because it's,
Mhm.
hand on, and then you can say, oh, you like apples, you like bananas, X. I don't like watermelon, whatever. So that's easy.
When we talk about teaching ABCs and numbers, I think all of us know why this is important. I have to spell my last name just about every single time I talk to somebody. So
Me too.
they don't get it. Even my first name, because there's different ways of spelling Lori. So I've just gotten so accustomed to doing that. This is a good practice so that they can, well, first they need to learn how to recognize these letters. And they can do that in a variety of ways. I think Nancy's mentioned a few of them already, using Scrabble tiles. Those magnets that you can put on the refrigerator and move around. It's a good, fun way to practice just recognizing what the letters are and then connecting them with their names. And then eventually being able to say and spell their name when they need to do that. And they will. You and I know they're going to need to do that because people are going to hear their name. They're not going to have any idea how to even begin to spell their name.
Right.
The same thing applies to numbers. You can use a lot of the same items, magnets on the refrigerator. You can use dominoes. You can count out with something and then connect the counting. How many beans are there? There are 3 beans, and you can connect that with the actual number. There are all sorts of possibilities. Again, I'd say one of the basic things they're going to need to be able to do, they need to know how to say their telephone number. To some people, I know it's not as necessary now with cell phones, but it's still good practice. And also their address, so that when they're in emergency situations, they can provide both those numbers and the house and address and spell it out if necessary. All right.
Okay, thanks. Okay, well, we're on to some 10 strategies. The next slide. Thank you. And the first one I wanted to say, I was doing tracing with a Congolese man who'd never been to school, and he actually has intellectual disabilities. And so I made the first initial of his name C. I made dots. And of course, I thought, oh, he's just going to trace them and make a C. No, he connected every other. So I was glad that he held a marker and he could do it, but don't assume anything. So if you're trying to work on tracing, you're going to need to model it. Okay, matching capital letters with lowercase. There's so many different fonts. So try to choose something that's, like Times Roman, that's common. Drawing. If people want to keep their own picture dictionary, that for the words they've learned, they can write it in English. If they can write it in Dari or Pashto, they can, and they can draw a little picture, and that helps them know, oh, that's apple or that's house. Flashcards, word walls, timelines are wonderful. Like, when was I born? When did I go to school? If I went to school, When did I marry? When was my child born? And so you can make one of yourself and then figure out through mathematics or looking at ID cards, help the person. And then eventually you can make a language experience story or chart or booklet about my life. It's all about me again. And eventually dialogues that are commonplace dialogues, things that people need to say at work, the store, or at school.
All right, back to reinforcing. It's important to use a lot of questions and answers so that they get used to anticipating certain kinds of questions and the responses that are appropriate. And when Nancy and I were talking, I said, even when I was teaching advanced level students at the community college, and those are all students doing academic coursework, it was very helpful, again, to do the questions, asking them lots of information questions, maybe at the beginning of a class for a warm up. And when they get more advanced, having them produce the questions is so nice because people have so much trouble putting things in the right word order. So even with very, very advanced students, I have found it to be very useful to practice the questions frequently. There's never too much practice.
Yeah.
I guess you can tell if they're starting to get bored answering the same questions over and over. But again, you can start with being the one asking the questions and they get used to answering those questions. And it feels good to recognize that they understand the question, they can answer it. And then as they get more advanced, having them actually ask each other questions or ask you questions.
I'd like to say something
Yeah.
quickly. Yeah, because when I was teaching the middle school ESL students, I was constantly holding up my hand, 5 W's, 5 W's. When I taught adult ESL at the community college, 5 W's, 5 W's. It was not insulting to them because they were not thinking that way. Also, never mind, I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead.
All right, I think we can move on to the next slide. And this is just a slide showing you that there are two different types of questions. There are yes, no questions, which only require a yes or no answer. And that's probably the least threatening. And if they answer no, or they answer yes, and you can tell they clearly did not understand what you were asking them, then that's good information for you to have in this ongoing assessment of what it is they're learning, what they're absorbing, what they're retaining, and so on. And then the more general information questions. But again, I think it's empowering for people to be able to answer a question, yes or no, and get the right answer. And again, you can tell very quickly whether they really understood your question or not.
Right.
And then even for the information question, more general information questions that would prompt more than a yes or no, where are you from? Maybe a lower level student can say Afghanistan, but as they progress, they can add to that answer. And obviously you want to be natural with how you're answering and answering questions. You don't always give a long answer. Sometimes you give a one-word answer, but there's a lot of room to build using these questions. All right.
Next. We have gobs of resources for you. And on this first slide, if you only were to look at 2 different links, I recommend the first one that's from Spring Institute. It has tips for adult tutors, all sorts of information. And then the white one, the one that's highlighted in white, that's REAP. They're Arlington County adult ESL. They've been a leader in the state for years on adult ESL. Once you get on there, there's stuff for students, teachers, volunteer resources. You'll be amazed. And like I said, if you just went to 2, I recommend those. Next.
And I did
Oh,
want
go
to
ahead.
point out too that this slideshow will be available on the Reestablish Richmond website. So you don't have to worry. It's a lot of information here and you might go, there's no way in the world I can even see that. It's too
Right.
small. But we have broken it up into the different types of resources so that you can pick and choose what is most important to you.
So the next slide, this slide is reading and vocabulary resources. And then, okay, wait a minute, go back to, okay. Reading of vocabulary, ReadWorks, Starfall, PALS at UVA. just play around with them, 1 or 2 a day or a week, working at your own pace.
And then finally, the last two, curriculum resources, if you are so inclined to get more information about how to set up a curriculum, there are many, many resources. No reason to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of wonderful stuff out there. And the same with professional development. Maybe you say, I want more than what I got at this training session. So you want to know what some of the more, next slide, Helen, professional development resources might be available to you.
And then the last 2 slides are resources for virtual learning and general resources for working with refugees, if this is new experience for you.
But I want to reiterate or re-emphasize what Nancy said. This can be overwhelming. So pick what it is. Maybe there's one thing. And I think the 2 that she highlighted on that first resource slide are very, very helpful. Our time is precious. We don't have necessarily the time to dig through all of these things, but it's there. I think you don't need much more than what we've provided here in terms of resources.
Right, but I'm an overpacker, so I would rather you have more than too little. So that brings us to,
Before we get to our questions,
yes,
what we want to do is ask if there are 1 or 2 brave souls who can share with us, unmute yourself, and tell us, this is a modeling of what we might do at the end of a tutoring session with a learner. Is there something that you took away from this session today that you found useful? Maybe it's something new. Maybe it's not new, but it made you think about it again. So this is really a great way to check people's comprehension at the end of a tutoring session. So we're going to ask the same thing of you. So if we could get 1 or 2 volunteers to share something, then we'll open it up to questions. Anybody?
shy
I'll
folks.
say something. So it's, I have some past experience as an educator and also a volunteer. But what I really appreciate here is that in this capacity, I don't have to start to teach them English from day 1. I can teach them what I need from day 1. Like you said, it's good to be reminded, what is it that they need to know? And start with that and just start somewhere. Friends who are volunteering who have no experience in the background are petrified. And it's hard to encourage them to just trust and just come and jump in and just start where they are. That's really important advice.
Thank
So
you.
that's what I'm taking away.
Yes, and it will change your life if you haven't done this before. It's a wonderful experience. Any other questions? Not questions.
No, it's takeaway.
Takeaway, exit slip, something you learned or you were reminded of?
I like the all about me. That feels really straightforward, usable right away.
Yes, good. Okay, great. Okay, so moderators, will you,
I see there's some questions in the chat,
I
and
think they're gonna ask us, I believe.
Yes, no questions, just people were sharing. Kim was saying, I'm a beginning ESL tutor with no formal training. I promise we'll get you those ESL books, Kim. We're gonna settle on one and order them. Sheila is saying almost all of the people I've tutored have wanted to interact with their child's school the most.
Yeah, right.
And I just wanted to add that for people who are overwhelmed, because this is what I said to Nancy, we've been doing this for many, many, many years. It is scary. The first time, what the heck do I know? How do I know how to start? What I think you're going to find is if you go in with just something pretty simple and basic, and you see how they're responding to that, it feels good, and it's
Yes.
empowering, not just to the learner, but to you as a volunteer tutor as well. So you can't go wrong. There's no way you can go wrong with what you're doing. Even if they're deer in the headlights and don't seem to know what you're talking about, you can back up, and you've got some little toolkits that you can use to help break that down a little bit.
And for the parents who want to communicate with school, then you can help make a 1-sentence note where they can fill in the blank. They might have more than one child, but my child, Abraham, was absent on this day, and maybe they're circled today because he was sick, and their signature or their whatever, their sign, their first name, what have you. And so that's something you can work on if they do want to communicate with teachers, but you need to create the template unless their English is more advanced. Anything else?
Kathy is asking, where have you found the best place to tutor? The client's home, question mark, or library, question mark?
Well, someplace that's quiet. And usually I've talked to many tutors who have contacted me and they're like, the whole family's there and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no. So I know the family wants to be involved and the kids are in school. They know more English than mom. Dad wants to help, and I'm good with boundaries. And so I will somehow lay it out. So this is mom's time. And maybe if there are 3 kids who want to participate, the last 5 minutes, you can say you all can come in. But if their house is like most of the ones I've been in are 2-bedroom apartments with many people, in that case, if the library is convenient or the client can walk there, or if you can pick them up, I would say a study room is preferable to any place that's loud and distracting.
Cecilia's asking, how do you help a student who can't commit to a session every week and is too overwhelmed with all that is going on to practice?
Well, back when we were looking at the lesson plan framework, I had 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. Maybe you could see, could they talk with you on WhatsApp for 15 minutes, 2 days? Tuesday, we can talk for 15 minutes and Saturday for 15 minutes or what have you. Like, try to break it up in small chunks, see if that will work.
And I think if they can't make a big commitment, you can still learn certain things, and just as long as their expectations are clear of how much they can learn in that small amount of time that they have, that's fine. I think it's fine, as long as they don't expect miracles to happen if they don't have time to practice and make a regular commitment. That doesn't mean they can't learn anything. I think it's still valuable and it's worth the time spent with the person.
And perhaps they, during your introductory meeting or next time, you could get them to the library and they could practice with Rosetta Stone, or you go through the links, because Starfall, it has the alphabet. It even has little, I'll say, short stories with rhyming words, predictable words that they can access. You might just say, can I send you a link twice a week? So I believe there's lots of ways to work around it. And again, we have to be flexible.
And that made me think of something else, if I can throw this in here. Please don't think having fun is limited to young children.
Right.
They love playing games. We did this all the time at the college, and the way they lit up, and again, I'm talking about an advanced level writing class. You bring out the game, they're interacting, they're engaged. And of course, classroom situation is different from a one-on-one or two-on-one tutoring situation. But I think sometimes people have the impression that they have to be very academic because these are adults, but adults want to have fun too. And it's a real stress buster if you're enjoying it, what they're doing. So anyway, from my years of experience, the excitement came when we were doing something really fun. And it was related to what we were learning. It wasn't just some random game that we were playing. So
I've given stickers, and when we had adults, like parent meetings at my last school, I made sure that we had certificates, because it is very important to prove I attended this. So maybe you can say, every 3 months, you could give them a quarterly, like they learned their ABCs. Or they could read and write their name and address. So it could be for anything, but it shows accomplishment. They can start their own little binder or portfolio. And when I taught adult ESL for 16 years for Henrico in Richmond City, and then later 2 years at community college, I gave stickers, and candy. So, I gave candy, and, it's like they didn't have to take it, but they always did. So, Yeah.
And I think the certificates are a great idea because you can make it, as Nancy said, for anything. And again, at the college, they wanted these certificates at the end of each semester saying, even though they got their grade and they got their, moved on to the next class. And I remember once a student coming in who had a notebook, they were all in plastic sleeves for each class he had completed. So it means a lot to them. And it is a sense of accomplishment when you can look through and say, oh, I've done all of these things. So I think that could easily be done in a one-on-one.
Oh, yeah, especially for people that never went to school or they had limited education, they will feel pride. Any other questions?
Sheila's saying that sharing music from online sources has worked well for her. Vera is saying, thank you, ladies. You both are great teachers, great presentation. Regards and thanks to you all. Janice is asking if most of clients or students, even those who just arrived, have cell phones. And I would say yes. I've heard Emily from the IRC say they give their clients one per household at least, and it's connected to the internet, and they have like the phone numbers of the staff connected to it or saved on it.
Good. Yes, music's wonderful. And then whoever said, well, your tutoring friends are scared to death. Guess what? Some of the clients are too. So, the more relaxed you are, like our previous slide, the friendly, more down to earth you are, less formal, you're both going to feel better. Anything else?
Can I say something? I was teaching before COVID in a large setting. We had, I guess I had up to maybe 12 students at a time from anywhere. And it was from 1 to 3, and at 2 o'clock, everybody get a little antsy and want to get up and stretch. So it became a routine of ours. At 2 o'clock, we got up and we sang Head and Shoulders, Knees and Toes.
Wonderful.
With the motions. So they could stretch, they laughed, they loved it, and they also learned easy parts of the body all at one. But it seemed we did it every time.
Great. Yeah, that's nice because you had a habit.
Yeah.
When I was teaching
I
it,
do that a lot of habits.
Community college, I would put the exact time that we were leaving and the time that they needed to be back, because it's easy to lose track of time, but I just wanted them to see it and come back, be punctual. And that's part of when we're sharing about ourselves and the boundaries and the time slots that we'll be seeing people, is that, we have busy lives too, and that we'll probably need to finish up at such and such time so that we can do the other things that we're doing. So we're not being rude, we're just announcing this is when I'll be leaving, or this is when I'll see you again.
It also helps with concentration. If they know you're going to be there for 15 minutes, they can get their mind around what 15 minutes is. If you're going to be there for an hour, they can be prepared to be there for an hour. It's not just this endless, oh, is she leaving now or whatever. I think it's super important, because I know that helps me. If I go to a presentation and it says it's an hour and a half, I get my head wrapped around that hour and a half, and they're not any different. So it really does help to do that, make that clear.
So yeah, I was going to say, speaking of an exit slip, we have 5 more minutes. So whoever has any final questions, put them in the chat or unmute and share.
And we also wanted to add, if you have any, just like we were saying, we want to individualize for our learners' need, our clients' need. If you're out there and you have questions, Nancy and I will do our best to help you or share ideas that we have. There's only so much you can share in a 45-minute talk, but both of us will be happy to do what we can. And our information is at the end of the slide.
So maybe you can show the last slide again, Helen, with our email addresses.
I put your email addresses in the chat.
Thank you. You sneaky little person.
Yes, and Nancy is in a group chat with our English tutors, and she's always the first one to respond when they have any questions. So if you volunteer with us, you'll have her as a resource anytime.
And when we were meeting in person or training in person, I did do several years worth of quarterly trainings for Reestablish Richmond, and I still get occasional phone calls and emails from people, and we're both glad to respond to anything that comes up. So,
And I'm always happy to pick Nancy's brain. If someone asked me a question and I couldn't answer it, oh, I'm not sure about that, but let me consult with Nancy. The two guys work well.
thank you. Well, goodbye, I guess. Nobody else? Yeah,
Yes, you're getting some
Thank
thank yous in the chat.
Thank you.
thank you. We're so glad you could come.
And we hope you'll enjoy your tutoring experience. As Nancy said, it's going to be extremely rewarding once you get over that initial fear, which we all have.
Mhm. We're developing relationships.
Yeah.
And it's eye-opening.
Thank you, ladies, so much. This was great.